Morning. This is Tim. How can I help you?
Hi. Do you fix networks?
I do. What seems to be the issue?
Well, I got this notification from my internet provider about illegal downloads or something, but no one here is doing downloads at 2 in the morning. So, how much is this going to cost to fix my network?
Is all of your data and everything at risk? And do you what do you do? Like,
What? Okay, I don't really care about any of that stuff. E-computer people are just as bad as car mechanics and doctors. So expensive, no value. I'm just a small business. I don't have time to argue with it about what is right and what's wrong. I just want it fixed. I can't stay open if my internet provider turns off my internet.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of Team Tim. We're here today with Trevor and obviously Team Tim. That little intro. So I'll give a little background. So Trevor and I used to work together at my MSP at Vital Tech. Trevor was one of our awesome salespeople helping us build out Vital Tech. And we used to do these role-playing games where, like you just saw, Trevor would call and we'd kind of learn from that. So that was one of the little outtakes from one of our previous playing games several years ago. But Trevor, welcome. Give us your quick 30-second hi, how are you, who are you kind of stuff.
Yeah, so Trevor Thomas, I'm here with Zen contract management and automation platform built for MSPs. I'm located in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And as you can tell from the video that you saw before and the one now, the beard's the same, but I've got better lighting and a better background. And Tim, I swear I didn't steal your background and paint it onto my wall.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, and obviously Tim from Fort Mesa is back again. No introduction, but sure, Tim, take a couple seconds and say hi.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Team Tim here again. Tim and I go back to last year. We've become close friends and partners. Both really looking to advance compliance, the people and processes part of cybersecurity other than the technology. So glad to be on and excited to talk contracts, compliance, and policy.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And you all know me, CTO over at Vital Tech Services and one of the founders over at compliancerisk.io. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. It's a topic that I love so much, and that's process and what do contracts and compliance have in common. Well, we asked our friends over at Tim GPT, and it kind of gave us a little bit of background on what do they have in common. So I'm not going to read this, but I will leave it up on screen for a couple of seconds, right? They highlight in ChatGPT compliance clauses or compliance requirements, right? So from an MSA, right, your managed service agreement perspective, there's probably things in that you should have discussing about compliance. Let's take, for example, you might have a healthcare client, right, in which HIPAA can apply if they're a covered entity. So you might want to include things around that kind of stuff in your MSAs, right? And then, failure to comply and what the obligations and the contractual obligations are around that. I won't read all of this, but yeah, you all have anything to kind of add into this whole, what is compliance? What is a contract? How does that all kind of tie together?
Well, one thing I want to say is that as far as contracts are concerned, always go to a legal representative. I am by no stretch of the imagination a lawyer. Our solution is cloud-based and it's just for the process side of things. But especially today, and I think Tims, you probably have way more experience with this, but the compliance and liability side of things is getting worse and worse by the day, it seems, right? There's a new breach, new malware, all of these things. And if you don't have your contracts in place that's outlining liability and the process to make sure that that's consistent, someone's going to drop the ball at some point. And who's holding the bag of risk? I think you've heard that saying before, Mr. Golden.
Yeah, that's who's holding the bag of risk. So Tim, what do you think about Trevor mentioned all these risks that we face, right? So how does that sort of tie in there, right?
So yeah, I mean, a typical contract, right? Like you think about carrots and sticks, right? Things you're, supposed to do or they want you to do, and things they don't want you to do. So compliance along those lines is what it's all about. So ooh, we got a comment here.
Yeah, Brandy. Hey, Brandy, how are you? Good
Brandy.
to see you. Thanks for coming in. Feel free to post any questions you might have in chat. We'll pop those up on screen. So, Trevor, you know me, well enough that like I am all about the preparation, all about sort of left of boom and shifting left. And, we've always kind of been down that path with, when you were working with us at Vital, the first thing I would be like, okay, what's the process? Okay, is it written down? Like, so when we think about that, like even from the MSA perspective, like what are some of the pitfalls that you see MSPs falling into?
That's a very, very loaded question. There's a couple different. Yeah, well, so let's go with the main one, versioning, right? So let's say that Mr. Golden, you've got your MSA, right? And you've gone to the Brad Grosses of the world, and he said this is perfect. This is how you got to do it. Send this out. You're going to be covered. Your client's covered. Liability is clearly defined. Whose insurance is taking care of what? I'm sure we'll touch on cyber insurance in a little bit here. So you've got that MSA. And then you're sending out, let's say 20, 30, maybe you have 150 clients. You've revised your MSA. You want all of them to sign it. Okay, now you get your admin to send it out. Are they using the exact same version? How are you tracking that they're being signed? Like that's one area is versioning, right? I mean, we can get into the technology and ease of use side of things, but versioning I think is huge.
Oh, man after my own heart. Tim, what do you got to say about versioning? I know what I have to say about versioning.
Makes my head numb. I mean, that's for sure, right? Like, how do you keep track of versioning and redlining? I guess when those contracts, like you're in process, right? Like, it's just thank God there's tools for that. I don't know how they did it 20, 30 years ago.
Literally printing them out with a red pen, faxing them over, and redlining. That's where the term came from, right? Literally using the red pen.
Stamp it like this on at this time. Yeah.
Well, and I know Greg Sharp, the founder of Zen Contract, he was talking about situations because he ran an MSP for 15 years or something. And one thing that had come up a couple times is salespeople putting them in a position where they were not profitable contracts, right? So you're quoting them, and I'm a salesperson, I'm greedy, I need to make all the money. So all I'm going to do is say, yeah, we're going to give you this sweet discount, right? Not realizing the implications of it not being profitable in the back end, right? There's no checks and balances. Same thing with an MSA. You give that off to your admin person, and they accidentally remove, section 3.1C, which is a huge one in this MSA, right? You have no idea. You get it sent out, signed off. You never think about it again, right? So this is the versioning control, but then you don't have checks and balances in there, right? Which I think aligns quite a bit with the compliance side of things, right? That's, what you guys do.
Right. And so, versioning to me, like change management is a key component within a compliance framework, right? And being able to track that appropriately. Like, let's put the tools aside for a minute. Like, let's think back to, when these things, before a lot of these SaaS applications were there, right? I would just have a Word document and it would sit there somewhere on some file share at some point, and I'd have to not only remember to review it on some sort of cadence, but I had to go through it and I had to look at what's changed in the environment and document that, and then have a little table at the top that was change management. July 2021 initial draft, 2022 formatting, 2023, 2024, blah 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 blah, right? And so now it was very easy for anybody to fake the versioning table. And I've actually seen that as part of assessments and evaluations of clients in their documentation. I've seen that. They downloaded some template, they made a couple of changes, and then they fictitiously filled out the change table, 2021, 2022, 2023. And if you actually looked at the dates, like that was a Saturday on a holiday weekend. You probably weren't signing that document. And then if you actually look at the metadata of that document, it was created yesterday. And the title was from Sands Institute. And it was last edited by Joe Snuffy at Sands Institute. And you're like, okay, you literally just faked this entire thing, right?
Yeah.
So when we look at tools and services, being able to help actually provide real time and real, data around that change management and not fake stuff is where, at least where I see a lot of the stuff going, right?
Yeah. And you guys do a great job. Like you gave me a dry run through of the platform, and it's awesome for all of that side of stuff. And I think you guys do a good job at kind of the next point in where do I see MSPs fall down? Okay, so let's say you're a one-man shop. You don't have an admin person. You have the same template. You're sending it out. You're very comfortable with that. You're not going to make changes to it. Okay, that's all well and dandy, right? If you're using a Word document, you can probably see the change logs. Okay, now let's say that you're a 10-person, 15-person, 20, 50-person shop. Now you've got a team. Now that human error is an X multiplier in the middle. Right? Because they can make changes, or you can make a change to the master, but what's to say that they're using the master that you've changed? Nothing. Right? They could have a version from, and this happened at the first tech company I worked at. And to be totally honest, our contracts weren't all that important. Worst case, like we were never getting sued for anything. Worst case scenario, we sent something out that wasn't enforceable and it was a couple $100 and we kind of just called it a wash, right? So the stakes are much different today. You send that out and someone's using a version from 2014 when there was no cyber liability insurance or anything like that in your policy, in your MSA. Well, you can be on the hook for hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, especially if if you don't have that insurance backing you up.
Right.
Or even if you don't have your MSA that's outlining what you're liable for, because then maybe someone didn't go through with a 2FA project and you don't have that in there and you're liable for it because you're the MSP.
Right. And so, that kind of brings back around like, the risk component, the governance, risk and compliance component, the risk component, right, Tim? So, maybe talk a little bit about the risk component of not having a due process, even in your contract pieces.
Yeah, no, and it reminds me, working for a big consulting firm, this was clearly an area where they saw where like a lot of the risk was, right? Like one of the biggest risks in the firm was contracts, either the MSA, right, the master service agreement, or like kind of the one-off projects, right? Like they had a team of lawyers that would like shepherd you along through that process, because you obviously understood the subject matter, or like what work was going to happen, but then they like basically like tag teamed you with a lawyer. Obviously things like versioning control, Trevor, like sounds like you need privileged access, right? Like you don't get to go steal a copy from 2012 and like copy it. So I guess my big challenge to like the MSP world is like, in the absence of your tag-along lawyer, right? Like you can bring everywhere with you. Like how do you kind of like, how do you make do, Tim, right? Like how do you get by with less, right? And like it sounds like some of the tools are on this call, so that's a good thing. But there still requires like governance to that, right?
Exactly.
As well as the process. So
you just mentioned a word that I love to hear and that we've been talking about for the last couple of months, and that's governance, right? So NIST is adding a governance domain to their entire risk management framework, right? Which is long overdue, right? And that you're going to start to see these attestations, right? And when we talk about governance and we talk about the attestation pieces, and we're digging through the controls and kind of all the draft stuff that's out there, right? But date timestamps on everything, like that's just compliance 101, right? Who did what and where? Tim, you mentioned privileged access management, right? Or identity access management. Basically, the right person with the right credentials to access the right thing at the right time, right?
Yeah.
And we're seeing that. Like NIST is already talking about, hey, probably need a governance domain, and things like your contracts can fall into that, right?
Yeah, it sounds crazy that there wasn't governance, right? Like no kind of like here's the NIST framework, but there's no empowerment. There's no, you know, guidance, mission, rules, right? Like all the things that like all those big buzzwords you hear at like companies, right? Like it's just like somehow you're going to do all this, identify, protect, you know, respond kind of thing, but like without any direction.
That's because, and this is where you know, and Trevor, you've heard me say this before, right? That's because as an MSP that might have started like fixing my neighbor's computers, then to realizing I can make money fixing computers. So I'll be, you know, one of those project break fix kind of shops, and then realizing I can make a monthly fee. So iterating through that process. However, the MSP community has been on the defense for decades. They're coming at us. We don't know where they're coming from, but they're coming. And we have been playing that defense over and over. Stop, right? Well, I mean, Trevor knows this. Like, hold on. The better I prep on left of boom, the better I have my contracts nailed, in the process nailed. When boom happens, I'm going to know what to do. I'm going to know what my SLAs are, right? I'm going to know what I should and should not be doing because I have an incident response plan that's been governed, that somebody other than just me is aware of, has been trained on, knows what to do, right? And so Trevor, like, talk a little bit about how like Zen's contract, I don't want to say secret sauce, but like that workflow that y'all provide. I mean, we're not going to get into a demo, but talk a little bit about the process.
Yeah, and like obviously I'm here, with Zen Contract. I don't want to just shamelessly plug it,
Right.
but it's along the lines of, okay, Tim, you own an MSP, you bring in all of your pre-looked at, it's been reviewed by legal, you bring in your templates, right? And you put that into the system. It's a template. You can restrict access for like removing sections or editing them, right?
Yeah.
So now you've got controls on that. If it's just you, I mean, you can do whatever, you're going to be the admin. But on that side of things, let's say you lock it down, you hand it over to an admin, your admin's sending stuff out, and you know that there's not going to be any errors, nothing's going to be removed because you've locked down the permissions on that. Right? It gets sent out, it gets signed off by your client. If you want counter signature, depending on your internal processes, you get that done. Then it pushes it back to Zen Contract, pushes it back to your PSA and to SharePoint, which is redundant on purpose. So you're not losing them all the time. And then there is a renewals aspect that we can kind of get into a little bit later, because that's going to be, I think, the overarching process kind of thing. But then you've got that stored, duly executed. You can do it for proposals too. I mean, really any document, but that's kind of the I don't know if I would go as far as calling that governance, but there are controls and access and permissions in place, right? So that you're not worried about it.
So as Tim said, PAM, privileged access management, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that boils down to something that we're talking, this is kind of the premise of why we're all meeting, is this process thing. And you used something about, viewing the right person, the right time, all of these things, right?
Yep.
And if you miss one step, it kind of breaks the entire chain. But you also alluded to something that I have one in my slide decks called the break fix hangover, right? And it's exactly that. You worked for, let's say, big company, you were a tech there for 15 years, and you had some clients on the side, and you're like, oh, I can actually make some money doing this. You do break fix, you're doing hourly, you're doing on-sites, you're ordering a laptop here and there. Then you get to a point where you hire 2 more people, or techs, or sales, or you get this kind of growth. And all of the processes that you put in place now need to change. But because you're in this growth phase, they often fall by the wayside, right? And the implication is that, in 5 years, when you're now 20 people, you're in a really dangerous position from your legality side of things, the compliance side of things. All your processes aren't scaling with your business. But you actually, I've got an anecdotal story that I thought about before we jumped in here.
All right.
So, when I was much younger and had a bit more hair up top, I played fairly competitive pool, and like semi-pro is kind of how I would rate it as. And I was playing, and I would go out and I would clean the floor with people, and I kind of plateaued where I wasn't getting much better. There was, some stuff that I just couldn't get over that hump. And we started playing in a higher division league. and I was getting the floor mopped with me, and a guy on my team said, you know what, there's something that you're missing in your process, in your setup, right? And I'm like, well, what is it? And he's like, you're going too fast, right? He's like, so, you know, and if you golf or if you play pool or any of those types of sports, you know that there's like a setup and then delivery phase, right? And a follow through, right? All of that was good. But when I was getting down to the table, I wasn't taking a couple seconds to actually line up my shot. And because I was so good that I didn't even worry about it. Why would I? Right? Like I'm killing people out here, right? I'm making money at the bar. I'm killing in pool league. Why would I even think about it? Right. So you get to this point, and I don't know if it's a cockiness thing, or if it's just that doesn't matter right now because I'm doing so good. But I took his advice and I implemented, and then I went from, I was kind of the bottom half of the league up to the top 5, right? By implementing this one additional piece of process that I was missing, right? But I had ignored it for 2 months because I was like, well, I'm just so good, right? And I think you get a bit of that with, the break fix, the growth, and you're really excited about things, and you're like, well, I don't need that, right? But the implications down the road, you don't even realize until you're there, until there is a lawsuit, or until your compliance is, SOL.
So I heard a couple of things out of that. First and foremost, I tried 9-ball. I did a few 9-ball tournaments. I got my butt whooped because I was cocky, the 3 to 9-ball run and try to win. Yeah, that didn't work out so well. But what I think I heard a little more deeply was that you got some advice, you made and implemented what seemed like a small change in your process, but you gained extreme operational efficiency, the words I like to use. You gained that leverage because you made a small change in your process, or even had a process to begin with, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm actually doing a talk at a show later this year that's all about that. Why do we delay implementing these small things into our process? Well, because we don't see them as a big deal. But they can be these small incremental changes that are going to have huge gains for you, right? And you just keep pushing them back burner, and then you talk to someone, my buddy who plays pool, talk to someone who had made this change and said, here was the payoff. Here's why you should try to do it. It takes a bit of focus. You do have to take a couple more seconds. You have to remember in your setup, in your stance, and your follow through that you're going to do this every time. But the payoff was huge, right? Same thing with compliance or contract. There's tools out there, or even if you're not using a tool and you're just going to use a process, implement it and follow it.
Right. Tim, what do you think about, have you had an opportunity to maybe iterate or make one minor change or do one kind of thing to try to help, what you're doing over there? Is there something that might be relatable to what you guys have done, one small change?
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of our platform is customer driven, right? So like in terms of functionality, it's basically like a voting, right? Like they ask for things, and the most people that ask for things, like we deliver them, right? Like so, it's really that's what drives the change management, and like the product roadmap over here. So I'm sure it's similar with you guys, Trevor, as well. But yeah, no, it's as you said, it's that incremental, it's the lean agile, right? That exploded post 2000, right? Like everything you learned at business school is wrong once that whole revolution came along. So
right,
it works, right? I mean, like there's a reason SpaceX builds rockets that are successful, right?
Yeah.
And cheap,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean that even something, it sounds crazy, like even something like legally bonded contracts or contract process, like you would be taking that same kind of like mindset of like little experiments, little kind of like trying to measure and figure out like what I'm doing wrong, what could I do better, what can I add to this contract to make it here's a word, Tim, right? I think they say performant, right? Contracts are performant. So.
Right, exactly.
The intended consequences of like what I was trying to do with them.
So maybe like, so I know Fort Mesa, as a Fort Mesa partner, right, as using their tools and having that as part of our MSP stack, right? Wait, they have a process all the way through from the initial sales conversation to getting the contract to signing the contract to onboarding, like you guys have a process now. You've automated a lot of pieces of that, right? You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, we automated a lot of that, right? Like, and we actually found a bunch of things. Giving away vendor secret sauce, but things like DocuSign or like a similar version of DocuSign. I forget what we use, but just that process of like when we sign a contract, we have them like fill out a form and populate just like their their company information, and that populates a DocuSign, and that populates they sign that quickly, and just using a bunch of platforms like Stripe and things like that, like relatively quickly you can get a contract executed, signed, and move the person onto onboard, like onto the platform. So it's, as you said, like I can't imagine doing this like 20 years ago, right? 30 years ago, like
Right.
Just and as Trevor said, there's just so many risks, like people screwing things up somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And like the sales cycle just must have taken forever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and that's, I mean, the sales process is, very much what I'm involved in. And for some people, they don't realize it's a problem until it becomes a major problem, until everything stops dead in the water and there's no progress, right?
Right.
Other times you think, okay, well, this is taking a little bit longer, for, this SaaS product, it should be, let's say, a 30-day sales cycle, but ours is 90. Well, we're a bit of an outlier, so we're just going to deal with the process that's in place. I've done some changes to our sales process as well that automates a bit of the onboarding, right? We've got a great customer success specialist who does amazing at onboarding, but getting them to that onboarding stage, there was a bit of a gap, right? And so we made a couple of incremental changes, and the payoff's been huge, right? Now we're not seeing those delays. People are getting onboarded faster, right? So it's really just those small incremental changes that are going to keep paying off. And if this is the other thing, is you look at your process and you go, well, this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah.
Right. Which is such a dangerous phrase, right?
Yeah.
Contracts, compliance, any of that. This is just the way that we've always done it. Okay. Well, I mean, we used to take horses everywhere, right? Try getting from Calgary, Alberta over to Vancouver on a horse in the winter. Right. Good luck. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Try getting from my house to like the grocery store. Yeah. Like nothing. Yeah, anyways, but so how does this relate, right? So we talked a lot about managing a process for your contracts, right? And we see a lot of parallels, right? We talked version control, we talked access management, right? How does this relate to compliance? From our perspective, like documents need to be aligned to the business practice, right? So we talked about that, right? Writing and getting your legal teams involved in your MSAs and your documents and your procedures and so on and so forth, right? We kind of made that connection there. But then the signatures, right? For us, like having an executive level person signing off like, yeah, this is our password policy, right? Bringing that part of the process. We actually call it the 4 A's in what we're doing: alignment, authorization, adoption, and assessment, right? And Tim hears me say this week after week after week after week, but it's basically a very similar process for your MSAs, as well as your standard operating procedures, your policy documents, your standard documents. But heck, we could take that even a step further and talk about HR documents, your employee handbook, right? Having these things not only help reduce risk, but it can also help reduce the time burden, reduce the level of effort burden for your staff and even yourself, right? Tim, we hear a lot, MSPs don't have time, I can't do this work. Well, if you can gain 20 minutes, half an hour of efficiencies in a couple of these other things, you then start to have time for other stuff, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Right. Like all these tools you mentioned, DocuSign, like the scheduler, right? Like schedule your onboard with this simple link. The way everything's so integrated and connected makes it pretty awesome. And that's saving you tons of time, right? Like the the time you should be spending is that FaceTime we talk about, right, Tim? Like that conversing and helping them with governance, or with, like, understanding their business. And the better you understand their business, the better you can automate their business, right? As opposed to just automate yours. So
Exactly.
that's where you make the real money. So
I mean, as technicians, we spend a lot of time with, tool bloat, and oh my gosh, shiny object, and oh my gosh, clickety clack. And before we know it, we're focused on the defense and the ones and zeros, and not the left of boom and shifting left and the business side, right? Tim and I and others, Jesse Miller and a few others, like, we talk about that week after week after week, using a thing like Zen Contract. You know what? Deal with your MSAs and your contracts here, and like gain that operational efficiencies.
Yeah.
Deal with your policies and procedures and documentation here, and gain that operational efficiency, so that as an MSP, we can be that, that technical partner to helping those business understand. Like, even when I run my business, like, I got a legal question, I'm going right to my lawyer, right? I'm not going to, like, my next door neighbor's friend who kind of did legal Zoom. No, I'm going right to my lawyer. And even at home, I have a problem with my plumbing, my pipe's leaking. Yeah, I could probably fix it, but I'm going to go to my plumber. I'm going to hire the electrician, because I've been shocked enough times. I'm never touching electrical again.
Yeah. Well, and you mentioned something that I think, especially in the tech industry, so many people experience is tool bloat, right? So you've got, let's go with the house analogy. So let's say that something goes wrong with your plumbing, your electrical, and your flooring, right? And you could call all three of those people, or you could call a general contractor and probably get it done for cheaper and faster, right? With the same expertise, right? The same thing happens here. You have something for your CRM, for your tickets, something for inventory. And I mean, I think there's some PSAs out there that do a good job of amalgamating that, right? But if we look at the contract side of things, Tim 2, would you be Tim 2 or Tim 1? Tim on the bottom of my screen. You mentioned DocuSign. Okay, so you've got DocuSign, you've got your e-cigs, you can get things duly executed. Perfect. How does that get back into your PSA? Right? How do you pull in from your PSA that information so that I didn't type Tim Golden instead of Tim 2? Right. So having tools that are all integrated, but a single tool that's doing multiple things can avoid that tool bloat. Right.
As Brandy said, which of the 3 T's are we writing this to? Right.
Yeah.
No. So when I think of, this as like having a process, I'm going to give my friend Alan a plug. So there's a good book out there that he just wrote. I'll go grab the link and drop it in chat. It's Process and the Other P Word, Process. Alan Edwards from Eureka Process. He wrote a really great book just recently published. It's like $5. I'll find the link and post it. But yeah, having a process, like, you hear me say that week after week after week. You probably are all getting tired of me saying this.
It's not a exciting or sexy topic to think about, right? Because it's all stuff that happens in the background, right? And I'll give you the the full Zen contract idea here. You do some legwork up front with onboarding, right? And everyone's always terrified about onboarding. It's going to take me forever, and is it going to be a time suck, and all of these things, right? So there's legwork you have to do up front. But the end result is you have your templates that you can send out in a couple minutes. You can put your pricing and your start and end dates in there, and you can manage all of your renewals. Right. So now you've got a process that you did have to do a little bit of work, probably 30 minutes in the beginning, but it's now streamlined it for the next 5 years, and it's scalable, and you've got your permissions. And what was it, Pam? Permission access management. You've got that. Sorry, Tim, all the acronyms are still swirling up.
Yeah. Privilege access management. Yeah, that's right.
There we go. Right.
Yeah.
So now you've put in some legwork for something that you're not looking at as this exciting thing with this huge payoff, but you've made a small incremental change that is going to give you huge gains for the entirety of the time you've implemented this new process, right? And it can still be iterative. Any process can be, but at least starting with something, then you can go back and make, instead of, let's say, your initial process setup with anything is X number of hours. Well, now it's a percentage of that X number of hours, and probably a much smaller one, right? So, Tim, on the like email, cold email licenses, let's say. You send them out and you notice that email 2 is always getting people to unsubscribe. Well, you can go back and you can fix email 2, right? But at least you've got something to work off, a baseline process.
Exactly. I just
Right.
dropped the link in chat for Alan's book, Process, and the Other P Word, which is also process. Love giving him a little plug because it's a great book. But so Mr. Tim, when I think about GRC and I think about the risks and I think about the things that we just talked about, right? So Trevor made a really good point. I could hire the electrician and the plumber and the floor guy and the insulation guy and or I could hire the general contractor. I know you, Jesse, and I have talked a lot about in the past. How do we get to be the general contractor?
What was that, Tim? Sorry.
How do we get to be the general contractor?
Right, which is really the MSP, right? I mean, how are they gonna cover all those things? Yeah, no, it's that ability to understand, but then also have those processes in place that replicate those the utility of all these, third parties that they want to hire or they can't afford to hire. So when you think about an MSP, like it's changing, right, Tim? Like they went to just being IT, right? Like they're just providing email and servers and whatever, right?
Yeah.
But there's a big void here for cybersecurity and risk and governance, right? So they are becoming the general contractor, and that's a good thing, but in a bad thing. The good thing is like you'll probably only get one swing at this, and you really need to step up to the plate and be able to basically seize the opportunity. But there's help out there, right? There's tools out there. There's cohorts. There's leaders. Tim, we've got some great people we listen to. We put out webinars, but we listen to other people's webinars. So, I think we're getting there. So,
yeah, and I think really, there's a bunch of us here. There's a bunch of resources always available, LinkedIn, YouTube, so on and so forth, right? Cognizant of our time, I know we were going to go for an hour, but for those of you that don't know, I'm flying out of here shortly. So, but I kind of want to bring this full circle, right? So as an MSP, right at the very beginning of anything that I do with the client is what, Trevor?
Send out the MSA.
Oh, and then having that process for the MSA to make sure it's the right one at the right time with the right version in the right language, right?
Yeah,
that's a lot. Like as Tim pointed out, like how do we used to do this with like paper?
You did this. You did a lot of this. I think that's the right one. I don't have time to read through 17 pages though.
Right.
Yeah.
And the first place we start here in our MSP space is with our contracts, with our documents. And then changing that mindset of, hey, now I have a process. It's well followed. It's well documented. I should take that same kind of thinking and do it over here. Onboarding, offboarding, password stuff, acceptable use stuff, blah,
handling
blah, blah.
ACH wires.
Yeah, wire fraud.
the biggest cyber insurance loss provider. Handling wires, right?
Yeah.
Like, somebody emailed me and told me to access their account and send this money to there.
Exactly. Hey, Greg, thanks for showing up. Yes, absolutely. Allows you to scale and triples your MSP's worth. Good stuff. It does allow you to scale, right? Starting out as you said in that beginning, that break fix as the one man, wallpaper hanger, right? One armed, one man, one human wallpaper hanger, right? So hopefully you're going to want to experience growth. Whether you want to or not, you most likely will experience growth. And in that growth, you're going to face challenges. And it's better to do those things up front as you grow, because there's a phrase that I learned in high school from one of my great high school teachers, and that is, if I don't make the time to do it right from the beginning, I am never going to make the time to do it over. right? And it's funny because I was talking to developers and kind of working through this and talking to a couple of MSPs, and I was like, the first thing that we did when we started writing code was put together a software development lifecycle, and it said, this is how we are going to operate. We are going to automate vulnerability management. We're going to automate SBOM. We're going to automate these things. So every line of code that we are writing walks through this process, because 5 years from now, I'm never going to go back and like fix any vulnerabilities. I'm never going to go so starting at the very beginning has been really helpful for us as we start to roll things out and do this software development lifecycle for this very large government contract that we're working on. Better to do start.
Well, and just to kind of expand on what Greg was saying there, like Zen Contract was born out of a necessity for the contracts, for them to be duly executed, not expired. And so think of it this way: they went to sell their MSP a number of years ago, and they said, okay, we're worth X dollars. And potential buyers look at it, and they're like, well, this one's expired. So now they had to build a tool and go backwards. Right.
Yeah.
Now, if they had this from day one, and let's go back to 30 minutes for onboarding, and iterative changes to make sure it's good for you, 30 minutes, or however much it takes to develop a cloud-hosted contract management and automation solution. I mean, and that's the trouble with going backwards after.
Right. Tim, maybe you know a little bit about M&A and due diligence. What is one of the, and since there's a lot of mergers and acquisitions happening in the MSP space, and those getting, a lot of buyouts, a lot of things happening in that space, and you know a little bit about that. What are some of the things that they look at during an M&A process?
Yeah, I mean, well, specifically on the cybersecurity side, which Tim and I are familiar with, right? Like they're going to really look at your security controls, right? So security controls are like, what are the what's another word for control, Tim?
Whatever.
Not that, right? Defense, right? What are your defenses, right? So a lot of the defenses some of them are like firewall and VPN and things like that, but a lot of them are just policies, right? And process. And people do this. If there's an incident, there's a breach, like they're going to do that, and they're going to escalate to Tim, and Tim's going to talk to someone else, right? So just having that in place and having that process in place is huge, right? And we're seeing cybersecurity, the ability to evidence things, and it might not even be cybersecurity, right? Just like the ability or what's your process for managing risk? That's a big thing in M&A. It's a big thing in cyber insurance. It's a big thing in third-party due diligence. Like even if I'm not getting bought out or merged with another MSP, maybe one of the companies I'm managing is going to do business with Amazon or put Walmart or something like that, right? They're going to want to know that you got your house in order from head to toe, and they're going to give you a good look. So that just experience there from, I'm sure you've seen similar.
Yeah, I was thinking a little bit along the financial side, right? So, to kind of pull both Trevor and Greg's comments in, right? So part of the due diligence stuff is show me your contracts. Are they in order? I want 3 years worth of them.
Right.
Why is this one different than that one?
Yeah.
And you're showing me numbers in this PowerPoint, like where are the contracts that back it up?
Well, and they're going to dig into it, right? So, if you're doing break fix and you don't have a signed contract, and let's say you do $5,000, like whatever, $5,000 a month, right, for your break fix clients, how much is someone going to buy that company from you for?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not much more than $5,000.
Right.
Whereas if you can show $5,000 per month on 3-year contracts, well, now you're talking about X multipliers on the sale of your business, right? Because you've got that backed up by enforceable contracts
Or
and visibility on them.
Take that even a step further for our MSP clients, right? So helping our MSP clients, our small businesses track their own contracts with their vendors, right? Like internet service provider, copy provider, blah, blah, blah. And I know that doesn't tie into Zen contract, but what I'm getting at is more from that general contractor perspective. Like I know all of my clients, when their internet expires, when their lease expires, when their copiers expire, when things are coming out of warranty, blah, blah. I know all that stuff because we gather all that stuff so that then I can be that general contractor and I can be like, hey, your lease is coming up for renew. Did you know that? Oh, yeah. Are you moving? Oh, right. Because we track that, right? We know that. Same thing with like, hey, your internet, like right now you're paying $1 zillion a day and internet prices have dropped. We can save you money that you can then give to me.
No, but I think that's a good point. Like, there's a certain trust element here. And I just went through this with one of our clients who was transitioning away from break fix into managed contracted services.
Yep.
And they were really nervous about it, right? They had clients handshake agreements for 15 years.
Yeah.
And they had gone to them and said, hey, we're tidying things up. We want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So we're sending you out this master services agreement that outlines the responsibilities of all parties, right? In a nutshell. And the feedback they got from all of their clients was resoundingly positive. Where they're all like, yeah, absolutely. I love this. We're coming into a new era. There's cybersecurity threats, all of these things. And then if we, like, let's take the general contractor analogy here. Your general contractor, that they're on the hook. It's one throat to choke, and they're going to manage all of these sub-trades, right? So you've got that trust factor there, which is so important today. And yeah, the one throat to choke thing, I think, is important there.
I'll take it a step further. We even publish ours right on our website. And this is where we direct everybody when it comes. Now, granted, we have a version where people sign and we have tracking, but if they wanted to read it beforehand, it's right there on our website. Go get it, read it, send it to your legal team, let them read it, let them understand it, right? And it, like, our MSA is literally right here for everybody with all the T's and C's. It starts the process. And then from here, we automate the whole actual deployment and execution of that. So, yeah, I mean, we take it a complete step further and actually publish it out there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen one of those. And that's, just shows your maturity there as an MSP. And I'm assuming that that's a good marketing tactic as well. Just the fact that you have your house in order. So, if you've got your MSA out there, and you're proud of it, right? You're touting it and you're saying, hey, like we're a mature shop. So.
Right. And that's exactly it. Right. So we want to bring that efficiency to our clients. Like, don't let some like T's and C's and MSAs get in the way of us working together. Like, here you go, send it to your lawyer, have them review it. And then if we need to redline it, as Trevor said, if we need to adjust it specifically for that client and use a Zen contract to do that, to then send it out and get the actual signatures, like, it cuts down on all that legal back and forth, right? Like, here's our thing. Go look at it, have your lawyers look at it. And if you want changes, send them back. We'll negotiate those changes. And it cuts down so much time. And as you said, Tim, it shows my client, like, yeah, we kind of got our stuff. This is how we operate. And it, right in the beginning, sets the precedence with the new client. This is how we operate. Like, we document stuff. We have procedures in place. We have things that we follow that we're going to help you as well.
Yeah. Well, and that there's one little tweak that you mentioned where your first step is to send out your MSA, right?
Well, that's part of that sales process.
Right. But then the impact of that is that you don't have to go back to that MSA for, okay, we want a new ThinkPad. We want to add, widget F to our stack. You've got that MSA signed off. You don't have to go revisit on every single proposal. So the inherent benefits are that you get it signed, but after the fact, the benefits are speeding up the entire sales process.
And now they're task orders or change orders or project orders.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, here's our stuff. We're going to do work. You're going to pay us. We're going to do it on this time. And the legal mumbo jumbo, like, fine. And now, you need three new servers. Here's the quote. Give me a credit card. Off and running. It's completely streamlines that sales process. And then the sales team, like, can actually just go upsell, cross-sell, and deal with that right in there, and maybe using a tool like Zen Contract push them out. Here's a change order. Here's what we're doing. Here's the scope of the services. Write me a check.
Yeah, exactly. Sign on the dotted line. Don't worry about legalities. We covered that. Sign this one. You can sign it on glass. Good to go.
I mean, think about it, right? If I had to, in every single agreement, put the scope of work, buy a new laptop, and then all of this stuff every single time, like, no, they're not like, no. Like, now I could just submit a change order that says, buy a laptop, here's how much it is, pay me and go.
Yeah.
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 All right. So we got about 5 or 6 minutes left. I thought we might actually end early, but looks like we're coming to the top of the hour.
Sure. I'd love to learn more on how it's all, they talk about rev ops and like the sales cycle and the contract cycle, and then what makes it, as we said, performant, right? Like, how do you guys play a role in that? And how does it, like, I guess it all hooks up, right? Like your sales process, like what gets the ball rolling, and like, how does it roll out the other end?
Yeah, so I think it would fit into the sales process along the lines of, you went out and met with a prospect, and because I'm still very much into the, like, let's actually meet, right? I mean, person or digital, whatever.
Yeah.
So you meet with them and they say, yeah, this sounds great, right? From there, your sales team or legal would send out an MSA, right? You get that signed off. This is how we operate, right? This is your transparency side of things, opportunity to redline and build that trust, right?
Yeah.
You get that signed off on. Then you can do up their proposal or quote and Zen contract and say, okay, here's the services we're presenting to you. You can have a breakdown of each of them with, pretty infographics or however you have your proposals laid out, or we can pretty them up, right? You send that out. And let's say you're using Autotask. You could have an opportunity in Autotask and pull that in, and it's going to populate the pricing.
Wow.
Or alternatively, you could just populate the pricing within Zen contract, get it signed off, and then it'll push back in Autotask and build that contract out, right?
Awesome.
So, and then this is kind of where it goes a bit further, is we have the ability to automate that step. So it'll automatically start that contract with a new end date.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say it's a 1-year commit. In within a year, that's going to pop into the renewals dashboard. So if you've got, your account executives who win new business, and then your account managers who renew and deal with existing clients, they go into the renewals dashboard, go, okay, in the next 90 days, here's the 10 contracts that are going to expire. We're going to revisit them, but we've also added on an MDR tool. We want to upsell them. So we're going to go talk to them, right? Go in person, present them. Here's the benefit for you. Here's the price increase, all that stuff, sell on value, build that trust up again. And I mean, these are tools that most MSPs are going to be paying for anyways. Right. You should probably get paid for them, right? You review it, send out that contract with the updated pricing, and the whole cycle starts over again.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great insight, like on the rev ops, like how you get from A to B. So awesome.
Yeah.
Because that's the big question, right? They're going to be like, well, why do I need this? Well, how does it create value? And like, you nailed it.
And I mean, I've had a couple of our partners who are just like, yeah, we just use it because it saves 5 hours a month, and it, we end up being, net zero on the cost of it, right? That's just the reality of it. It saves, how much is your time worth if you're saving 5 hours? But then as you get more advanced, and this is where, you put in a process and then you iterate. So you put this process in, okay, sweet. Our MSAs, we can send out in 30 seconds. We know they're standardized. We know that there is privileged access management on changing that content. So we can send all those out, right? The next step is, okay, we can send out our proposals. The next one is on the renewal side of things. You can look at it and go, you know what? We leave a lot of money on the table for renewals. And I think that this is a wide sweeping concern with a lot of MSPs, where they'll just auto renew, or they won't do cost increases, or they won't add new pieces of their stack. And you see your margin go from 25 to 20 to 19 to 7, right? And you don't really revisit it unless you have a tool that's actually managing the renewals portion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. So you're not even, like, as you said, you're saving 5 hours, but they're not accounting for the reduction in risk. So
yeah, well, intangible benefits, right?
Right.
And I mean, it's different for everyone, right? That was just one example. A lot of people do come to us for we want things locked down, not necessarily operational efficiency. And then, as you get more mature in the process, we want to make more money. How do we do that using your tool?
Yeah. Well, you gain the efficiencies because of it, right? And and you reduce your risk burden, right? And your liability burden, right?
Yeah.
So, well, as always, parting words, Trevor, if you could leave us with sort of one or two nuggets and parting words, what would that be as we wind down here?
Process is really important, and it's really, really challenging to implement it when a problem actually comes up down the road. So start now. And liability, risk, cyber insurance, compliance, all of these things are getting more and more every day. Address those now and put processes. Yeah, see, I said process twice. Put those in place today too, right? It's the liability down the road is just too big.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much. And then what about you, Mr. Tim? Besides being on mute, and you can just keep talking and we'll lip read.
Hopefully not trying to sound like a broken record, but yeah, I mean, as you said, I thought the analogy you gave, Tim, great, like building code, right? Like think about like DevOps, and you get it right the first time, you audit the code, you make sure it works, you put it in place. Automation and reduction in risk, right? So like you're getting both of those values out of a process, right? So it's you know, I think we'll continue to talk about this in these coming webinars, Tim. But you know, excited to learn more about Zen Contract.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And you know me, I'm gonna say shift left, right? Go back to my Boy Scout days. Be prepared, right? Start someplace. Whether you're starting at your MSA and putting a process in place, whether you're starting in your sales cycle and you're putting a process in place, or you're light years down the road like the rest of us and you're building out a compliance process. Pick something. Start someplace. Do something. Take 30 minutes this week. Find one thing, and you could document a 3 or 4 or 5 step process. You don't even have to flesh out all the gory details. Start with your MSA, right? And define what your MSA process is. Maybe reach out to Trevor at Zen Contract, right? Or start with your vulnerability management program, right? Reach out to Tim at Fort Mesa. Start someplace. Set 30 minutes aside. Don't go get that next cup of coffee, and take that 30 minutes to write down 5 or 6 or 7 bullets, not hundreds of them and not paragraphs of them. One small slice leads to a giant piece of cake later, right? Take your small slice and continue to iterate over time. And that's about it from me anyways. Thank you, Trevor, so much. As always, Tim, thank you. We'll be back again on Friday. Tim, remind me what again it is Friday?
I think it's Friday at 3 o'clock. The guests are, we have one of our favorite partners actually will be on board. And then we're talking left a boom, right a boom. So we have some, we have an MDR solution on, Canadian MDR solution on as well. And Sention.
Yes. Yes, I know those guys well. So join us. LinkedIn Live. And while you're here, I'll just do the, click the likes and the subscribes and the shares, because we're supposed to ask for that stuff. But honestly, if there's a topic that is interest of you as an MSP or as a general cybersecurity or technologist, feel free to reach out. We want to try to level up the MSP community, help them shift left, and continue to grow and share our knowledge. I'm Tim Golden from Vital Tech Services and Compliance Risk, and we look forward to seeing you on Friday.